Indian summer.
Welcome everyone, thanks for being here. My name's Kajal Nisha Patel. I have a background in visual art, particularly photography. I recently qualified as a yoga instructor, so I wanted to bring some of that information into this talk today, particularly tips and tricks on managing stress and anxiety, which I'm hoping will be useful for you. For me, working as a visual artist for the best part of 16, 17 years has led to an enormous amount of stress and anxiety. It's about balancing numerous projects and numerous things all the time. I'm always juggling, and it's also a very precarious industry to work in, always being worried about money, those kinds of things. So for me, this has resulted in an autoimmune condition called lichen planus, or oral lichen planus. And I want to talk to you today about how I've managed to overcome the stresses and anxieties of the world of precarious work through yoga, and also having all these different tips and tricks such as nutrition and essential oils. So I hope this is going to be useful for you. So to give you a bit of an overview, what is Ayurveda? Ayurveda actually means the science of life. It's a philosophy. Yoga is just a small part of Ayurveda. It's the physical component. Though it's very important, it's often the entry point to a deeper inquiry. Also, as we're often preoccupied with the physical body in trying to fulfill its needs and desires, the yoga becomes a really important place for people to come to a point of trying to start understanding Ayurveda. So even yoga can be a very important way for us to begin the journey of healing our bodies, but ultimately through consistent practice, most people arrive at Ayurveda when they're trying to then bring their bodies back into equilibrium. Ayurveda can be described as a holistic way of considering our place in the world. So how we are affected by our environments, our habits, our thoughts and our actions. In this presentation, I've outlined 7 tips for managing stress: simple living, bullet journaling, nutrition, professional help, essential oils, and the types of uses that they can take. So a lot of people have an awareness of essential oils, and using essential oils to actually fight chronic illness is something that a lot of people don't really know a lot about. So for me, they've been really helpful. So I'm going to be taking a bit of a deep dive into that subject. Yoga, and I'm going to be breaking that down a little bit into 3 parts: pranayam, breathing; mudra, which is the hand gestures; and mantras, which is the chanting. So I'll give a little bit of an overview of all of these little areas. And lastly, CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. So they're the 7 tips. And also there's going to be a PDF which you can download from the Indian Summer website, so you can actually start to take a little bit of a deeper interest in this area if you want to. I just want to say that all of these topics that I'm going to be talking about today are from personal experience. So if you want to seek professional help, then you should really use that PDF and take the advice that's given on there and seek professional help, because these are all my experiences. Tip number 1, simple living. So what does that mean? Some people actually know or may recognize the idea or the concept of simple living as minimalism. This had a huge impact on my life. My life was complicated in many ways, like a lot of people's lives are. I had too much stuff, I had too many clothes, I had just too much of everything, equipment that I've built up over the years, art equipment, those kinds of things. So slowly, over probably about 7 or 8 years now, I've been decluttering, and it just meant getting rid of everything that I didn't need. And that, for me, led to an enormous clarity in my mind, just every single morning, going to the cupboard, knowing exactly that, just less decision making, basically. So our life is just full of decisions, and we can have information fatigue. So for me, decluttering became a really important way for me to start to clear my mind. Media consumption, controlling the intake of passive and harmful activities. That was a really big thing for me because my background was in photojournalism. So I was always absorbing myself in news and information. And that kind of information can be quite detrimental to our mental health. So for me, it was about controlling that kind of intake. I still watch the news, but I limit it. And I try to look at informative, deep journalism, investigative journalism, as opposed to mainstream media, which can have a very detrimental and long-lasting effect on our mental health. Controlling addictions, all sorts of things. This could include substance abuse, sugar, television, even exercise can be done in excess, sex, all of these things, controlling all of these kinds of addictions so that we can have a more balanced mind. How does this relate to Ayurveda? Well, many people think that Ayurveda or yoga is about denying yourself of the good things or pleasure. But actually, it's more about cutting out those things that we no longer need or are no longer necessary, all those things that no longer serve us. So in Ayurveda, we believe that there are 5 elements: earth, fire, so they actually relate to the digits as well on our hands, our fingers. So we have earth, which is the ring finger, fire, the thumb, water, the little finger, air, the index finger, and ether, the middle finger. Ayurveda teaches us that in order to have a clear and untroubled mind, we need to bring balance into our lives in a number of ways. Diet and other intakes affect what is described in Ayurveda as our dosha, or our nature. So there are 3 doshas: Vata, which combines space and air; Pitta, which combines fire and water; and Kapha, which combines water and earth. When something is out of balance or too much weighted on one side or the other, we can begin to experience imbalance and stress. We're essentially born with these imbalances. We inherit these imbalances often from our parents, from maybe the environment that they grew up in, the stresses that they were born with. So we as children, as young babies, we inherit these doshas. But through Ayurveda, we can begin to address these imbalances. So how does this actually result to simple living? All of the elements are always present. Ether is probably the most abstract of all of these elements, but we must always remember that if we're trying to move forward in our lives and trying to do something new in our lives and welcome new things, then we physically need space to make that happen. So we need to clear some of the clutter that's going on to make space, physical space, for new things to follow. Tip number 2, bullet journaling. Bullet journaling, the most obvious thing is getting organized, getting your head, your mind, and your space organized. It's also about making intentions, making plans and sticking to them. It's about breaking down large tasks, planning ahead your days, your weeks, your months, and your years. It's also about monitoring progress. It helps you to reflect on your successes. Sometimes it feels like we're just going nowhere, and keeping a journal or a diary helps us to sometimes reflect on the things that have actually worked for us, and it makes us feel like we're actually moving in the right direction. Archiving successes. This time last year, I just wanted to get better. I was so ill and I was just wanted to get better. So in the beginning of my bullet journaling, I always write a little gratitude sentence. This time last year, the first thing I would always write is, I just want to get better. I just want to get better. Now I have lots of new anxieties. So again, it's really important to keep looking back and be grateful for the things that you've actually worked at to get yourself to where you are. I'm really grateful for my health, and I'll never take my health for granted again. So journaling can really help you to live in gratitude. There are, of course, lots of different methods to organise your life. This particular method just works really well for me because I'm a visual person and I like to stick photographs and anything that I've collected down. I like to do drawings, so this is a really good way for me to actually, it's a bit like going back to being a child and having a scrapbook, but also having everything in the same place. It's almost like a sketchbook and a journal and a diary and a planner at the same time. So there are lots of templates that you can download to get you started again. You can just go to the Indian Summer website and you can just download the resources from there. Tip number 3, nutrition. Clean eating, removing sugar, reducing dairy, processed foods. Of course, we all hear about these things, being lactose intolerant, etc. These things have never been an issue for me while I was in good health. However, as soon as I got my autoimmune disease, I realised that imbalance in dairy or any processed foods was really having quite a detrimental effect on my health. I'm sure in time these foods can be reintroduced into my diet, but for the time being, I'm having to limit all of these things. So keeping a food diary can really help you to start to understand what is causing these kinds of issues in your body. It's about understanding what are the allergies and how to detox your body of all of the heavy metals and all of the toxins that have built up over time. So again, digestion, autoimmune disease it really affects your digestion. Toxins build up and we have to get rid of them. When people take antibiotics, it can also affect the gut bacteria. It can start to remove the healthy gut bacteria, so it's important to start repopulating that gut bacteria. A key part of this is to start understanding the stress and anxiety and the conditions for healing. So autoimmune disease is really, for me, has been an effect of too much stress and anxiety. And I'll go into that a little bit later, how stress and anxiety affects the digestive system and how it can lead to autoimmune disease. But it is important to understand how stress and anxiety can actually manifest in a physical condition. Supplements, the importance of eating well, especially if you're ill. So again, for a lot of people, they may not need supplements, but for me and for a lot of people who do become ill, supplements can become a really important part of maintaining a healthy balance and in maintaining energy levels as well. Because a lot of the food that we eat is genetically modified, so we're not getting the right vitamin intake. So just introducing a few simple vitamins such as vitamin C and vitamin A, vitamin B, they can be really easy ways to start building up our energy levels. Tip number 4, the importance of seeking professional help. I've been visiting a professional osteopath for the last 10 years. This started with having neck issues just because I was carrying the camera all wrong. But over the years, I've realised that I've needed to visit the osteopath more and more for different conditions. In the end, it was stress and I was having neck spasms. So again, physical symptoms began to be treated. I started receiving acupuncture and deep tissue massage and understanding how to actually massage yourself as well. It can be a really effective way to release the stress and anxiety. But for me, visiting the osteopath was just the beginning. I went for a job interview, and at the end of that day, I started to experience very severe neck, a tightness in my neck. And by the end of the day, I was completely bedbound, and I was like that for 4 days. So I wanted to illustrate how stressful that particular situation was for me and how that actually affected in such a physical symptom. So I started to learn how to massage my own neck, and it's something that I have to keep on top of now, doing regular neck movements, and this starts to crop up every time now I am sitting at my computer for long periods of time. So again, it's really important to have these kinds of little tricks in your toolkit. So when I began to experience these particular neck spasms, I knew that this was actually really serious and something had to change. And I decided that I really needed to understand and speak to professional people about understanding my stress and anxiety. I started to visit a local osteopath who had a 3-step training program, and he helped me to understand what stress and anxiety was, and he explained that stress and anxiety is actually a fear response, and what is the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system. And when we're in this state of fear, then our body starts to shut down. It's literally living for the now rather than planning for the future. So this for me was a huge light bulb moment in trying to understand what is actually happening in my body. Why is it that my digestive system is not working because I'm stressed? And the body literally starts to shut down because instead of actually protecting our vital organs, your body starts to send its resources to your arms and legs, because in the natural world we would be running from predators. So that was a really simple overview of how stress and anxiety and autoimmune disease was explained to me. So again, recruiting the help of professionals and paying for their services for me was a really good investment, and in starting to understand how to actually change these thought patterns. Through this 3-step coaching program, my osteopath explained to me the link between my physical symptoms and my stress and digestion. This particular image here in the middle, you can see I started to make a literal breakdown of all of the things that have happened to me since I was a young baby, the earliest memory up until the present day. I broke it down into years, and I started to understand that there were deep-rooted traumas. I started to understand that they were deep-rooted traumas, but then they also became trigger points in the future, and how these future trigger points can then lead to almost an unearthing of these particular traumas from the past. So understanding these thought patterns and starting to implement new behaviors to start to literally dig out those weeds from the roots. So these kinds of techniques have been really helpful for me. Tip number 5, essential oils. There are 5 different stages of recovery. Essential oils assist in the healing of the physical body. Essential oils assist in the healing of the heart. Essential oils assist in releasing limiting beliefs. Essential oils increase spiritual awareness and connection. And essential oils inspire the fulfillment of one's life purpose. So again, for me, I understood it in 3 levels really, for the body, the mind, and the soul. Of course, I started to use essential oils when I was very, very ill. When I was that ill, I was really adamant that I didn't want to use pharmaceutical medicine. I've been ill before, but for this particular thing, I was more ill than I've ever been before, but still I was adamant that I wanted to do it in a natural way through Ayurvedic medicine, but also through essential oils. It was a bit of a chance encounter. But I do see essential oils as a component of Ayurveda, because essential oils are using all natural ingredients, so I see them as fundamentally linked. Importantly, essential oils can be used in 3 different ways. Topically, you can use them on the skin. You can use them aromatically through a diffuser, but also internally, you can actually ingest some essential oils, not all. Again, not all essential oils can be used internally, so it's important to understand the brands that you're using and whether or not they're safe to use internally. So again, if you're going to use essential oils, it's important to consult with a professional and to understand which kind of brands can be used internally, and they're very, very powerful as well. So you need to speak to a professional before you start to use them. I started using essential oils about a year ago. It was a really lucky kind of encounter, and I had an appointment at the hospital. I had to go for a biopsy, and I found a lady on Instagram who was using essential oils, and she just so happened to work at the Leicester Royal Infirmary. She's a pharmacist. So I got in touch with her and I met her, and she introduced me to these essential oils that particular day. And for me, that was a life-changing thing. She introduced me to lavender, frankincense, and tea tree, and I started to apply these particular oils on my ulcers. At the time, the ulcers in my mouth were around about 2 centimeters large, and it was incredibly painful, as you can imagine. And these ulcers had been there for about 6 or 7 months, so I literally thought I was going to have to live with them for the rest of my life. This is what the doctor was telling me as well. This is what the dentist was telling me as well. So when I met her, in fact, I met her through a hashtag that she'd put, which was the same condition that I had, lichen planus, and I knew that this was a very rare condition. So the fact that she was the fact that she knew what it was, and the fact that she worked locally, for me, it was like serendipity, really. So it turned out that she had this condition as well, and it turned out that her mother had it as well as her sister as well. and her mother had actually died from this condition. So she really, really knew what she was talking about. So I trusted her completely. So I bought the oils and I started using them religiously. I would use them 3 or 4 times a day and just rub them on my ulcers. And it took a long time. And this is the thing to remember about Ayurvedic medicine and essential oils or anything that's natural. It's not a quick fix. And I think because we're used to quick fix solutions in pharmaceutical medicines, we want those results very, very quickly. But with everything that's good in life, I think it's important to remember that we have to have patience. And like I said, 3 or 4 months later, I started to see a huge difference in my ulcers, and now they're gone. So that was a remarkable stage of my kind of healing process, and I just recommend them to everybody now. Everybody has some experience of essential oils, but because it's an under-regulated industry, it's highly unlikely that you've actually experienced their full benefits. They have remarkable healing properties, but you do need to source the right brands and speak to the right people to understand exactly how to use them. Anybody who knows me will by now have received some sort of samples of essential oils. I use them for absolutely everything. So here's a rather attractive image of me just after I had my biopsy. And as I said, this is the day that I met Elizabeth. And the picture on the right is my face, probably about a week after I had the biopsy. It took at least 3 or 4 weeks to go down, but yeah, you can see how severe that actually was. Tip number 6, yoga and pranayama. I've been practicing postural yoga for more than 8 years. I'm 41 years old, but despite my illness, I feel stronger and more focused than I did when I was in my teens. However, practice of asana practice, which is too weighted on the physical side of yoga, we often hear that isn't always a good way to go. And I definitely started to find that I was too weighted on the physical side of yoga. I do have quite I'd say maybe advanced practice, but I realized that I wasn't really getting many of the mental benefits that you're supposed to get from yoga. And so I really needed to change the way that I was actually practicing. So now I'm focusing much more on the subtle aspects of my body, how my body and my mind feels when I'm actually practicing, and most importantly, the breath. So how are we regulating the breath? How are we taking deeper breaths so that the breath can be channeled to different parts of our body? But also there are other things which, once you have been practicing for a long time, or for a lot of people, they might be practicing as part of their culture. A lot of my students come to me and they've been practicing things like mantras through their grandparents. So again, these kinds of practices can help us to develop a deeper inquiry into your physical and your subtle bodies. So now I always practice pranayama, which is the breathing, the mudras, and the mantras, the chanting as well. So again, as I said earlier, the fingers relate to different elements in your body, and by being in tune with these particular elements, we can start to understand what it is that we need in our lives. For example, if we're feeling really lightheaded and we're just running around here, there and everywhere, the earth element is really important as a way for us to actually ground that energy. It's the ring finger, because being in a stable and calm, loving relationship, it grounds us. So we use the upwards motion to stimulate that energy, and if we want to decrease that energy, we go downwards. Or you can also put your thumb onto the nail or the knuckle, so that grounds that particular element. So again, all of the different elements work in different ways. You can use the water element if you want more flow in your life. So if you want things to pass, if you want things to just move smoothly, or be like water as well, this is a really good mudra for this. So the fire element, this is called the Adi mudra. So if you are trying to stimulate the digestive fire, or if you want to decrease lethargy, this is a really, really good one. If you do this for a few minutes and you do it quite, not painfully hard, but you will start to feel the thumb pulsating, and you will start to feel that fire increase in your belly and your body. So again, all of these energies can be used to develop our sense perception. So the more finely tuned we are with what's happening in our bodies, we can balance or stimulate or decrease, and you can use them interchangeably. Now that I've started to understand how to use these particular subtle tricks, I'm enjoying these practices in many ways more than the actual yoga itself. Finding somebody to teach you to do a handstand is relatively easy. You can do that online. There are all sorts of courses available, but actually finding somebody who's done the deep work of the mind is actually extremely difficult. Moving from the gross body to the subtle body and releasing trauma through asana practice. So what we're often doing through the asana practice is getting to a point where we're feeling more flexible. And a lot of people report that they feel quite emotional when they do yoga. And that's physically because we are holding trauma physically in the body. So when we do these deep back bends or any kind of postures that really release those kinds of those kind of stiffness, what we're doing is literally releasing trauma, and that's why a lot of people feel emotional on the mat. So what that's doing then is making us lighter and moving us from the gross body into the subtle body, and less living in the mind where our anxieties are overriding our lives, and moving more into our bodies and actually enabling our bodies to move freely, and also bringing those two things into balance, Purusha and Prakriti, which is the consciousness and the nature, our physical body. Tip number 7, CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy. It can also be known as a talking treatment. CBT can help you to manage your problems by changing the way that you think and behave. It's most commonly used to help people with anxiety and depression. It can also be useful for other mental health problems and physical health problems as well. CBT is based on the concept that your thoughts, your feelings, your physical sensations and actions are interconnected, much like Ayurveda, and that negative thoughts and feelings can trap you in a vicious cycle. CBT aims to help you deal with overwhelming problems in a more positive way by breaking them down into smaller parts, much like the bullet journaling. CBT shows us how to change these negative patterns to improve the way that you feel. Unlike some talking treatments, CBT deals with your current problems rather than focusing on issues from your past. And it looks for practical ways to improve your state of mind on a daily basis. CBT isn't for everybody, but it has been shown to be an effective way of treating a number of different mental health problems. It can also help with bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, eating disorders such as anorexia or bulimia, obsessive compulsive disorder, panic disorder, phobias, post-traumatic stress disorder, psychosis, schizophrenia, sleep problems such as insomnia, and problems related to alcohol misuse. It can also be helpful in treating people with long-term health conditions such as irritable bowel syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome, and fibromyalgia. Although CBT cannot cure the physical symptoms of these conditions, it can help people cope better with their symptoms. Before I started doing CBT, I went to counselling for 2 years, which helped me to understand maybe the root issues that were affecting me, but CBT actually gave me some practical techniques to start to help to understand what was happening in the moment when that anxiety started to crop up. There are times where my heart started to beat really, really fast, and I would have palpitations, and I felt like I was going to have a panic attack because of something that had happened that was external to my own experience. For me, CBT, what it taught me is how to start to handle what's called the automatic negative thought patterns, and it helps you to change the way that you think, and it helps you to stop internalizing issues. If you want more information about CBT, then you can go to the NHS website and just type in cognitive behavioural therapy, and it's a free service. Sometimes there can be quite a long waiting list, but it really depends on how urgently you need the treatment. So if you need the treatment, then I do recommend that you can go to the NHS website. There is also counselling available, which is local to you, and it's often donation based, so that can be also a really good thing to do before you enter CBT. If you've been listening to this feeling that some of it resonates with you, then please get in touch. I'm happy to help while signposting you to the right people and the right places. A quick step guide is to make a list of everything which you feel is an issue for you. This could include physical symptoms, emotional issues, etc., etc. It's really good to get a clear picture and work from there, because trying to process all of this information together can be really overwhelming. Take one step at a time. For me, 2019 and 2020 have just been about getting better, and that's it. Step number 2. Holistic healing is like an invisible map. Finding help can be really difficult. So the 7 tips that I've outlined in this guide, in this presentation, can be useful for you to begin your own healing journey. You may feel like you need some or none of these things. Either way, I hope there's been some takeaways for you, and I hope it's helpful. So please feel free to download the PDF and to begin your learning journey. Thank you for listening. I hope that's been useful.